Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. It's time to jump back in time to a 1997 release to see how the year 2015 would look. It's a rather special little title for you today in the way of Groove On Fight for the Sega Saturn. By 2007, the Sega Saturn had become a 2D fighting superpower in Japan. Its speciality in processing multiple sprites, as well as coming with all that neat arcade stick gear, made the Sega Saturn shine as the console for serious gamers to play at home. If you had Japanese hardware, that is. The Marvel titles, the Capcom blockbusters, and SNK lineup simply made it the place to release your fighting game. For those of you that have followed the channel for any amount of time, you'll be well aware of my love of the genre. So, when I had the opportunity to pick up Groove On Fight recently, I was very excited indeed. It's certainly not on the cheap end for collectors these days. With Capcom, SNK and Marvel fighters taking the glory of the age, there were a few games that simply got bundled out of the limelight. In my opinion, Groove On Fight was one of these. Now, before we get into this, it's worth stating that these days the price of the game has skyrocketed. Partially due to the economy and import prices, partially due to the resurgence of Sega's popularity, and due to the fact that this was a Japanese Sega Saturn exclusive. Throw into this that the game was developed by Atlus. Perhaps not best known for their fighting games, I've always associated them more with adventure and strategy games. There is, however, an amount of pedigree here. Groove On Fight is actually the third instalment of the Power Instinct series. Of course, Japanese gamers will know the series much better as Goketsuji Ichizuko in its native language. Perhaps the best known in the series is the original Power Instinct for the SNES. It was very much another Me Too Street Fighter clone of the day, with a few extras to distinguish itself. In the West, a highly forgotten title for many gamers. I certainly hear very few mainstream gamers talking about this series these days. Anyway, Groove On Fight, let's get stuck in. To begin with, it's worth knowing that there are two major Saturn releases of the game, one with a 4MB RAM cartridge, one without. I went for the cheaper option because, let's face it, I've got enough Saturn RAM to support a modern day PC's needs by now. Also, the RAM cartridge edition is now going for silly amounts of money online. You will need that 4MB expansion though to get the best out of the game. Extra frames of animation will add to the smoothness and detail of the fights overall. Out of the box, select from 11 playable characters, each with their own backstory and styling. Groove On Fight is very much a tag team fighter, so be sure to select two complementary fighters if you can. The character designs here are nothing short of magnificent. You've got everything from your traditional martial artists, gothic style sprites, police from the future, cute fighters and witches. Truly, you couldn't ask for a more diverse roster. Within a minute of booting the disc up, the polished tone of the game has been set. What's more, the characters actually feel different to play with. The usual payoffs between strength, speed and specials are very much alive here. This really is a setup that will appeal to many hardcore fighting fans. It feels instantly familiar, yet unique at the same time. So, without spending too long on the fighting system, it's worth knowing that this is a typical 6-button setup of strong and weak kicks and punches, with the addition of taunts via the left shoulder. The right shoulder button will tag your partner in. This is the first element of the game that really starts to build up the need for a strategy. Unlike King of Fighters, whilst your teammate is resting, they will slowly regain health. So, if you are able to field a more nimble character to drain time and avoid attacks, your potentially stronger partner will be recovering. Conversely, if you see your opponent using this tactic, it's time to move in and apply some pressure. Next up is the special bar, or stress bar as it's sometimes known. This will fill not only as you defend, but also as you land attacks. Overall, this makes for an interesting mechanic, as it encourages faster, more aggressive battles in my opinion. Both of your characters will share this bar, so think carefully about which player to tag in and deliver the special for maximum effect. At the beginning of each fight, the game grants you a level 1 special, which makes for an intense start to the battle. Here I used my special attack as my opening gambit with Remy. In this case, it connected and instantly the opponent was on the back foot. And how about those specials? Here, Remy delivers an organ tune that summons the Grim Reaper. Quite a special indeed. Or how about Purpura and the man-eating plant?
Ready, go!
Yes, there's certainly a lot going on here if you put in some time to learning the ropes. Don't fancy a special? Well, how about just simply picking up a fallen fighter and throwing them at your opponent? Yes, it happens. In addition to the specials, there's also the ability to grapple when in close for some decent damage. Then, as a kicker, how about unblockable moves? Yes, they will wind up slower than Yoshimitsu's sword impale, but will crush your opponent. The various fighting mechanics alone in Groove On Fight make it one of depth and strategy. It will take the gamer some time to appreciate all of the possibilities that can unfold during a fight. The main mode that you will play is obviously the arcade mode, and I have to say that it's all quite standard fare, but very well presented. The character designs are excellent and entertaining. The game even held my attention in the story department, despite my less than perfect Japanese language skills. You end up fighting Ume and Otana from the original game. Then it's on to you versus Rudolf Garfheimer. Defeat him, and then it's you up against the game's big bad guy, Bristol Weller.
Ready, go!
Then, wait, your partner turns on you Double Dragon style. I never saw it coming. But then, Bristol Devil emerges from Bristol Weller. What the hell is going on here? So, then he turns your former partner into a zombie. Strange.
Ready, go!
Then onto the final fight with Bristol Devil himself. Then Solace arrives to save the day, and we're off to Vienna for a music recital. Somehow, the game really does manage to pack in a really well thought out and entertaining ending. Each endgame battle slowly ratcheting up the jeopardy, and perhaps one of the better ending scenarios I've seen in a fighting game. You can always then watch the credits roll, or continue beating them up. It's your choice. But of course, that's just one of the endings. It could all turn out very differently, depending on which character set you choose. As you complete the arcade mode with each character, you unlock bonus content, including development concepts and art for the game. Sketches, alternative plans and general drawings are all available on show here. It's always great to see this type of content, as it really adds to the story of game collecting itself. I particularly found the early cover concepts an interesting process to see. It's clear to see that some of these elements did make their way into the final physical piece. In terms of what I'll call the basic edition, you'll get a well printed manual with all the relevant background, special moves and techniques, a rather well put together piece overall. For the price, I would have enjoyed a pull out poster, or even a wall chart move list, but that's perhaps just my wishful thinking, and always being hungry for more collectibles. There is of course that 4MB RAM edition that packs in an extra cartridge at a hefty price premium. The game comes in a larger cardboard sleeve. Overall though, there's not really any extra content, so this one is perhaps for those who have quite a bit of extra cash to spend. I was more than happy with the standard release. So what we have here is a game with great sprite design, a thumping techno and orchestral soundtrack, good fight design with a really interesting cast, special moves, tag mechanics, unblockable strikes, throws and grapples. Yes, it's fair to say that this game is a winner. If you enjoy 2D Saturn fighters and like what you see here, you're going to take some great enjoyment from this one. So on the surface of things, you're probably thinking, I need this game in my collection, and you're probably right. It's got all the fun of the genre and definitely worth a playthrough. The 6-button configuration in particular makes this game an instant winner. But as you might have guessed, it wasn't a huge hit. Otherwise we would all own a copy of this one already. Yes, back in 1997 there were simply bigger fish to fry if you collected Japanese fighters on the Sega Saturn. As to whether you should buy this title for your collection now is a very different question to whether the game is good or not. Here's the issue. Groove On Fight is trapped in a no man's land of gaming, the dead zone if you will. This is perhaps best illustrated with 4 of the game's closest mainstream rival series of the day: SNK's King of Fighters, Capcom's Darkstalkers series, Street Fighter and Marvel series. There were also dozens of other fighters around at this time, but personally these best represent the main rivals of the day in my opinion. In graphical style, I'd have to say that this one is perhaps most similar to a mid-90s King of Fighter game. If anything, King of Fighters just about has the edge in graphical quality, but it is close. Now, before you all go hating on this, here's why I believe that. King of Fighters tends to have slightly more interesting backdrops in my opinion, and the sprite designs are also at least on par with Groove On Fight. There's just more going on in a King of Fighters game most of the time, particularly in the background animations. Of course, this is just a personal opinion. Selecting from a shelf back in 1997, the latest SNK release would no doubt have been a clear draw over the unknown Atlus title for many gamers, as it was a known quantity. In terms of pick up and play fun, well, the Street Fighter collection surely has to take the prize. Overall, more content, instant beat 'em up gratification and lots of depth. For mainstream gamers, it's likely that most would opt for the known quantity of a good Hadouken. However, this may have been a mistake to pass up on something a little bit different. This doesn't take away anything from Groove On Fight, but for most on a limited budget, rightly or wrongly, I believe most gamers of the day would go with the Street Fighter option, even though we all have at least 6 copies already. Then there's the various other Capcom 2D fighters competing for your attention. If you need known franchises, the Marvel lineup is the clear draw for collectors over the relatively unknown lineage of the Power Instinct series. Even at the time, the chance to get your hands on Marvel vs Capcom on the 32-bit powerhouse would have cast Groove On Fight into the background. In a similar way, I'd also dare say there's a fair amount of similarity between Groove On Fight and the Darkstalkers series. At their time of release, they were both slightly alternative to the mainstream fighters. There's the cute characters, the over-the-top movesets and specials, and of course the dark atmosphere. Yes, the games share more than just a few similarities. Yet I'd have to say that Darkstalkers is a bit more excessive in its execution. It's wall-to-wall exaggerated moves. Darkstalkers really knows what it wants to be and follows through on this throughout the game. you're left in no doubt what type of game this is. It's Capcom's branch of gaming that indulged in over-the-top, family-friendly horror. In Groove On Fight, sure, Remy and Papura have some pretty weird and fun animations. Others, like Larry though, could have been lifted straight out of a more clear-cut fighter, such as Garou Mark of the Wolves. At times the over-the-top moves seem to be a bit of a whispered message. Groove On Fight is neither all-out crazy animation such as Darkstalkers, yet nor is it completely on the more grounded and technical side such as a King of Fighters title. This makes the choice all the more difficult for collectors when it comes to collecting Groove On Fight. Who exactly is this game's audience? So you see, Groove On Fight is a game that actually does a lot of things very well, and it is a great game to play. If it existed in isolation, we would be saying, wow, the animations are great, the music is superb, the plot engaging, and the fight mechanics really add to the genre. Sadly, Groove On Fight was born into an era where there was always a bigger franchise stealing its thunder. The things that make Groove On Fight great are the very same things that the better known games took chunks out of it for, piece by piece. So what we ended up with here is a truly unusual situation of having a game that really is excellent in its own right, yet never excels in any single area enough to beat off the fierce competition of the day. Throw in the hefty price tag and the lack of a Western audience, and you have an island of a game. Gosh, this episode has gone depressing quickly. So you're probably now thinking, actually I could just get one of the King of Fighters games and the Street Fighter collection for the same amount of money and be happy as a Sega Saturn collector. But you'd be wrong. Probably. Groove On Fight does offer up a sneaky bonus feature, 4-player action. Granted, not all at exactly the same time, but you and 3 friends can team up in the same battle via the multi-tap. Tag a friend in and play together. Stick that up your pipe and smoke it, Capcom. In all seriousness though, I obviously did think it was worth shelling out the cash for this one, despite already sitting on a pile of Sega Saturn fighters. Groove On Fight is different enough to warrant playing, and the quality of the build can't be denied. It feels different to its competitors, yet familiar, and it could just be the game you're looking for if you've mastered the more popular 2D fighters on the Sega Saturn. It may be a bit of a niche game these days, and the price point being the game's real enemy for collectors. But if you're either a Sega Saturn fighter enthusiast or a collector of one of the more obscure Atlus titles, then Groove On Fight should hit the sweet spot for you. Groove On Fight is a game that dared to compete with the establishment and does hold its own in terms of quality. Groove On Fight will always be considered an outsider at the party, but in my mind that is perhaps what remains so special and appealing about this game. You don't always have to be the most popular to be very entertaining. Until next time, happy gaming. Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!